Hi there, my name's Ian Wright, and this is the third in a series about anxiety, and this is called The Dogs, which is really about fear and anxiety. So I'm just going to take an example of myself going running in the morning. Every morning I go running quite early, often near dawn. There's a place where I run where there are these dogs, and they're pretty. There's one's an Alsatian and another big guard dog, and you run past this wall and they jump up onto this wall, which is sort of 6 foot up into the air, and they go crazy, absolutely wild, salivating, it's a strong kind of guard dog response. Now, I've run past them many, many times, hundreds and hundreds of times. They've never once come down. I don't know what would happen if they fell down or came down, but it's interesting because they're higher than you and taller. I think they think that they're bigger than you. Now, sometimes if the wind's in the right direction, you can get past the wall without them coming. But it just made me think about anxiety and threat responses. We have a predator, the dog. The nature of the threat is uncertain because they're just barking. They're actually just barking. I haven't been bitten by them. I've never been bitten by them. I don't have necessarily a fear of dogs, but I do have a fear response, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. My son has a fear of dogs, but he was bitten in the face when he was young, so I can understand why, but I don't. But I have this threat response that kicks in very naturally. So the amygdala, which is the part of the brain which deals with threat response, two parts of it. One part is this unconscious threat detection. It's pre-conscious. It's boom, there's the threat detected and I'm going to respond. That's what it does. It fires back a response to the two other parts of the brain which are very important. The second part is it prepares oneself for a conscious fear reaction, which is up to higher centers of the brain where you actually think about it. Now, the amygdala sets this response off in the hypothalamus and other areas of the nervous system. This flight, fight, fright response, boom, reaction. Sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear. Pupils dilate, blood pressure goes up, arteries constrict, the adrenals pump out, the liver mobilizes glucose release, the heart rate goes up. Also, the pituitary produces adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, which goes down to the adrenals, produces cortisol, which is a more long-term stress response, which has effects like releasing stored energy to go to the muscles, increasing blood pressure. Now, the interesting thing is how we consciously and unconsciously respond to fear, to the threat. So, what we can't stand, or what our brains can't stand and find very difficult, is uncertainty. The brain does not like uncertainty. We like clarity in potential future outcomes. So the uncertainty is, will these dogs attack me? Will I be attacked by these dogs? But there are certain things that come to play in this. The first being, belief. So we've got two things. We've got our belief system and we've got our cognitive learning and memory system. And these areas come in to play. So the first thing, which is very interesting, is actually, let's talk about anxiety. In anxiety, there are one of a few things that can happen. So in an anxiety disorder, which means not normal anxiety, but becomes a disorder, there is an increased attention to threats. There's a hypervigilance. Now, there's also an impaired ability to distinguish threat from safety. 3, avoidance. Now, avoidance is a very interesting one, because I went through a phase with the dogs of unconscious avoidance, where I'd go, do you know, I actually think I'll run up the path to the top of the hill, and then maybe I'll run back down the path again and not go round the road, and then I went, you're actually making up stories in your head that it might be better to run like that because you're actually avoiding the dogs. So, avoidance. In anxiety also, you have an increased reactivity to the threat, and you have an over-valuation of the significance of the threat, and also you can have a poor adaptation of behavior or cognitive control. So, meaning that the cognitive control of the threat is what we're talking about is me saying to myself, right, I have run down this path 100 times. Now the dogs may bark, but I've never been bitten. So I'm overriding this amygdala through the prefrontal cortex and it's like putting a brake on. It's called the prefrontal brake, actually, which means you override with a higher center and say, I actually am perceiving safety, even though it seems like a perceived threat. It doesn't seem to have ever happened. So that brings in different parts of the brain, the hippocampus, which says, my memory says, actually, it's not happened. Now, this is complicated slightly by my belief system. In my belief system, I ask, well, what if the dog fell down? What if the dog decided to come down? Do I believe that this dog will attack me or not? And I frankly don't know. I don't know. You look at sort of dog whispering ideas, and the dog's on higher ground, so he thinks he's bigger than you. If a dog came down and fell down to my level, would actually he attack me? He'd probably be terrified of me. Or would he? He may be so scared he'd attack me. So I'm thinking all these things through. I can't believe that I'm doing so. And and it's producing, albeit a short-lived, anxiety response in me. So what do I do about that? How do I change this anxiety response? The first point, feel the fear and do it anyway. For me, what I do is I take it as an opportunity. So I go, right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid avoidance. I won't produce avoidance, because avoidance is maintaining or accentuating an anxiety story. So I'm going to go, actually, I'm going to do it. It's interesting because when I start my run, I think, it's somewhere in the back of my brain, there's the dogs, which is quite funny. And I've only become conscious of it, actually, and becoming conscious of something I think is very important. Go, okay, those dogs are a bit scary, right? But I'm going to go anyway. I need to do it. I need to go through it. So I try all sorts of tricks, I tried, using some Taoist practices where you can bring in your energy, so energetically they can't feel you. That works to some degree, but if I'm running with my partner, it won't work because I can't do that for her. So, the old Taoists would say change the wind direction. So you're always downwind of them, but I can't do that. So there's this idea of extinction, which is one of the ways which we treat, or anxiety can be treated, So we repeat to desensitize the threat. So we keep going back to it. I keep running past the dogs and recognize and be clear that I'm not being bitten. So I'm meeting the threat. I'm not avoiding the threat. I'm desensitizing my fear response. And actually, eventually, hopefully, I'll have less anxiety, and which is actually true. That does happen. to some degree. Now, there's other things that we can do also as well. There's two breaks. There's the prefrontal cortex break, which seems to down-regulate the amygdala fear instigation response. There's the vagus break, which is to do with calming down this sympathetic response in the body. And you can do specific techniques by certain vagal breathing, which calms down the breathing pattern. So I slow down a little bit, become very aware of any tension in me, and I will relax and actually slow down and go slower past the dogs, which is kind of bringing a vagal response, so I don't have such a classic kind of flight-fight response. Another this is a classic one. Another time I was running, different place, and I was running into some woods. Obviously, I shouldn't run at that time of morning, and I was running, and out of the woods from the path, as I ran into the woods, ran this Doberman, huge Doberman, running at full pelt, and we collided with each other. I shrieked, "Ah!" The poor dog freaked. He yelped himself. His tail went between his legs, and he ran as fast as he could away. So I terrified him. Anyways, the thing is how do we, because actually there's anxiety disorders and then there's feeling anxiety. And so employing a variety of these techniques to actually address, to become conscious of, avoid avoidance, and start to desensitize the threat, to learn safety learning, to understand that I'm safe here and it's okay. Now, the trouble is if one day I might actually get bitten, but hopefully not. The thing is the amygdala has been shown to be plastic, meaning you can change it. You can change this response. So doing some of these almost cognitive behavioral responses, or physiological retraining the brain. I'm very into the idea of retraining the brain and out of these responses, and I'm working on and have developed with people a series of techniques which desensitize these different parts of the brain that become sensitized in anxiety disorders, and actually to remodel anxiety. And that's something that I find very exciting, and it's a work in progress. I wish you well.